this should still be okay to review, right?
Dashing through the snow in a one-horse open sleigh.
Yeah, it'll be fine. I was just busy. Imagine having to wait 30 years for a highly anticipated film to finally release. I mean, you'll have to imagine it. I wasn't even around that long ago. The original Ghostbusters is widely considered one of the most popular movies of the 1980s, blending together a perfect pacing with a tight-knit structure, combining supernatural horror with dry witty humour and some of the best comedians at the time to produce a film that is still loved to this day, with many fans re-watching it year after year every Halloween. The sequel, that was released 5 years after the original, however, failed to live up to the standards set by its predecessor, and led many to eventually regard it as a derivative rehash of the original. Though that remains a heated debate amongst fans of the film that I'm personally not brave enough for. Due to the shortcomings of the film alongside some disagreements among staff members and crew, the third film was inevitably put on hold and the franchise as a whole would drift forward in a sort of proverbial purgatory until the tragic death of Harold Ramis in 2014 seemed to put the final nail in the coffin for the franchise as a whole. This, however, was quickly noticed by Sony, who thought it was the perfect time to produce their own version of the franchise, this time with an all-female cast, which was certainly a film that came out. But the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, however, as Jason Reitman, the son of the original Ghostbusters director Ivan Reitman, appeared to us in 2019 to tell the world that Ghostbusters 3 would indeed be finally happening. It would be reuniting the original cast, as well as ignoring the attempted reboot of 2016. Which was met with some chagrin by some members of the online community, despite the director Paul Feig being all for the motion. They believed it was an undermining of the 2016 film, as its own sequel was snubbed due to its low performance at the box office. Finally, after all the years of waiting, Ghostbusters 3, now titled Ghostbusters Afterlife, was released to the world, and the question remains, is it any good? Yes, but it is flawed. If I had to describe Ghostbusters Afterlife, it would be the best way to go about doing a soft reboot of a franchise. It contains enough source material from the original to make plenty of callbacks and references, while also introducing new characters and concepts that will hopefully be expanded upon in the future. Taking what was loved about the original and building it up rather than tearing it down. It's what The Force Awakens almost was, but never quite reached. That being said, however, the film definitely has some apparent flaws. It's not as intelligent as the original, and some concepts never truly reach their full potential. I believe the best place to start would be to give a brief rundown of the plot before going into the characters and what I thought overall. I'll try to keep it tied to what's been shown off in the trailers, but this is a spoiler warning, so if you haven't seen the film and want to get off Ivo Shandor's wild ride, now's your chance. The film kicks off with the death of Egon Spengler, having lived a reclusive life on a farm in the middle of nowhere for the last 20 or so years. With his death, all of his possessions and his estate are passed on to his estranged daughter Carrie, who, having recently been evicted, relocates there with her 2 kids, Phoebe and Trevor. As time passes and they begin to settle into their new home, Phoebe starts to uncover clues that her grandfather was working on something big, and that there may be more to his death than what was first assumed. After attending a summer school lesson, she finds out that the entire town used to be owned by a man named Ivo Shandor, the same mysterious figure from the original film whose plan it was to bring Gozer the Gozerian into our world by any means necessary. Egon was aware of this as well, and this was the reason why he sacrificed everything, including his family, to stay in this town to fight back against the approaching threat. Now with his passing, it's up to his grandchildren to carry on what he started and prevent Gozer's return or risk worldwide destruction. The parallels between Afterlife and the original Ghostbusters are strong as well as intentional. It's been over 30 years since the original film, and they wanted it to feel like a passing of the torch in every way possible. It contains many of the same beats as the original, the team slowly learning to work together, the first disastrous attempt at catching a ghost, the slow unravelling thread of a much larger threat before the explosion of ghostly activity, crossing the streams. Even Gozer and the Devil Dogs are making a return. Talk about fan service done right. However, despite these callbacks, I feel the film suffers unjustly due to the modern nature of cinema. As every film now has to have a small marketable creature, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man makes an appearance in the hundreds. And while it is amusing to watch the rather intense ways that these things want to kill each other, some of them rather graphic when you think about it, it begs the question why? Is every marshmallow that's possessed by a ghost destined to turn into this? Even though the original was just a physical manifestation of Gozer? Or can it be considered too much of a callback in some regard? A lot of people initially had some hang-ups about whether a film like this could be carried with child actors, but it's safe to say that they all do a fantastic job. Finn Wolfhard is the new generation's version of Winston, not particularly knowledgeable about anything, but an everyman who can help out in any way that he can, whose face seems to be permanently stuck in a why me sort of expression, but given the context of the film, it sort of makes sense. Logan Kim is the equivalent of Ray, naive and earnest to a fault, as well as being deeply invested in the events going on. Celeste O'Connor is this group's version of Venkman, full of sarcastic and dry humour, and sometimes not taking things as seriously as she should do. But the standout star of this film is McKenna Grace as Phoebe, a socially awkward nerd who struggles to connect with people, much like her grandfather. She's clearly smarter than everyone else around her, but it's never done in an obnoxious or patronising sort of way. Her connection to the grandfather she never knew and her growing interest in his work and life is the emotional heartbeat of this film, culminating in a touching tribute to Harold Ramis in the climax of the movie. It felt especially well handled as it was part of the main body of the film rather than tacked on at the end of the credits. The side characters do add a lot of charm to the film, with Paul Rudd and Carrie Coon especially having some funny moments together. It helps keep a light-hearted touch on some otherwise slower moments within the film. Despite the overall praise I give this movie with what was done well, afterwards you can't help but shake the feeling that they missed a lot of opportunities with this one. Bringing in the antagonist of Ivo Shandor would have been a great chance to finally flesh out this mysterious figure and give us some insight into just who this guy really is, what he wants, and just why he was so dedicated to that fine piece of spectral androgynous ass. But he's probably got at most less than a minute of actual screen time before disappearing. It's a similar story as well with Gozer. I expected the film to expand on their origins or give them some motivation, but I guess sitting down on a chair really cool like also works. Now, as mentioned previously, fan service in and of itself is not inherently a bad thing. Is it so wrong to give people exactly what they want to see? But it's also no substitute for good storytelling. It's meant to be underpinned by a strong, well-written script, and that's where I think Afterlife's main problem lies. In its eagerness to please the longtime fans of the Ghostbusters franchise, or those that were left disappointed by the 2016 film, it sticks so close with its homage to the original that sometimes it can feel like it was almost scared to try something new or creative, often failing to grasp the opportunities laid out in front of it and never quite reaching the full potential that it's capable of. If I had to sum this film up overall, I'd have to call it a well-meaning, if sometimes clunky love letter. Yet despite its flaws, I hope that it succeeds, because it sets itself some solid groundwork that hopefully can be expanded upon in a sequel. A fresh canvas with the new cast where they can branch out and try something new or be unafraid to be as creative as possible. The possibilities are boundless, and at the end of the day, Afterlife could have been a lot worse. So let's be thankful for the little victories.